why. And like if someone have different ideas, and then we can share, and I think it's a good starting point. And then by the end of it, even though we might not be able to change that student mind, they might still insist on that I teach a specific kind of varieties. Then I think there would be some more discussion, and like some food for thought for other students. That's my take on this.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
if I can I jump in there, Tim, and
Yes, of
ask?
course.
So sorry, one of the other questions that came up was about even if teachers want to change, or even if students, are kind of more open to the idea of a more global approach to English language teaching, that teachers are busy people and there's a real lack of materials. And so how would you suggest teachers navigate this, the difficulty of kind of lack of materials to draw on for their teaching?
So in terms of materials, it's an existing issue. Like, it's not only in terms of lack of materials, or just maybe like in the context of my study, it's also the case that you might already have the materials already available, but you're not sure how to use it. For example, one of the class I observed, the teachers decide to to have the students read this one article about how English is changed nowadays. So when I saw that on the syllabus, I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. She's gonna talk about this diversities of English or something. But since that class is about like grammar, it's a grammar class, like a reading class. So the teachers mentioned nothing about how English has changed, how it has become the world's language. But the only thing they care about in that class is about the how many noun clauses are there in the article, how many adjectives, and also about all that grammatical stuff. So with that lack of material, so this is where you have the material, but you don't see the use of it, because there's nothing, is you don't want to address it. So if you don't have the material, lack of material means that you can also come up with one. And I think right now there are many like more resources that you can adapt into your own context. For me, sometimes I just, it's the same article, but as soon as you change the way you address it, instead of having them, finding like how many now clauses are there, then you ask them to think more like critically about the real message of the article. Wow, you could also talk about the grammar, but that is something that you can add. So make use of the existing materials that you have right now. Yes, please. I think we've got a question.
Oh, okay. I think we. Do we have a question? We can. I think we have to kind of move on. Sorry, I think we. If we do another one like this, we might space things out a little bit more, because there's just so much discussion and so many questions and things going on. So yes, okay. So Heath, would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Great, thank you. Let me just share a slide. Okay, great. So let me introduce happily to the next speaker. So Ali Fuad Selvi is an assistant professor of TESOL and applied linguistics and chair of teaching English as a foreign language program at Middle East Technical University in Northern Cyprus. So his research interests include global Englishes, and he's going to talk about that today, but has covered areas such as equity and inequity in TESOL, professionalism, marginalization, and discrimination in TESOL. And second language teacher education. So Ali Fuad Selvi was also chair of the last TESOL conference, and so he's heavily involved as a key person that works between kind of both research paradigm and implications for teaching. And so we're very happy and excited to have him speak with us today. So I'll hand it over to Ali Fuad.
Thank you so much, Heath. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Just give me a second, please.
And I should say, while Ali Fuad's setting that up, that he was very modest in his bio. He's done some huge projects, including editing whole volumes on teaching English as an international language for the TESOL Encyclopedia, amongst many other edited and authored books on the topic.
Thank you so much. Can you see my slides right now?
Yes, it looks good. Yeah.
All right. So wonderful. So first of all, I'd like to thank Heath for this wonderful introduction. I also would like to thank Tim and the entire conference organization team for this opportunity. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. And I also would like to thank each and every one of you today for choosing to attend this presentation over a zesty Sunday brunch or dinner, depending on wherever you are. So I feel quite honored to be here with you today. And I hope to offer you some good food for thought. So, well, the fundamental premise of my talk is quite straightforward and simple. So for this, I would like to go back and would like to reiterate this insightful quote by Sandra Lee McKay, who just reminds us that the teaching and learning of an international language must be based on an entirely different set of assumptions than the teaching and learning of any other foreign or second language. So, well, being at the heart of global English as language teaching, this understanding actually changes anything and everything we do in the name of English language teaching. And it actually brings us a set of insightful questions that we need to address as English language teaching professionals, including who are my students' target interlocutors, what are their attitudes towards English, and what factors influence such attitudes, who should teach them, how should I assess them and ensuring that they use English as a lingua franca, what culture and whose culture should they learn, and finally, what grammatical, pragmatic, and cultural norms should they learn. However, in the interest of time, today, I would like to focus on specifically on one of the dimensions here, and that is the teachers. And I would like to do so by deconstructing some of the widely used terms and labels that we use or that we choose to define ELT professionals, native English-speaking teachers, also known as NESTs, as well as non-native English-speaking teachers, often abbreviated as NNESTs. These labels, I think, as a mode of categorization of identity, have several inherent problems, and I'd like to go ahead and share those problems with you in a few seconds. So by using these terms, we actually connect the dots, right? And make, as Seidelhofer argues, make an automatic extrapolation from competent speaker to competent teacher based on linguistic grounds alone. In other words, we often use these terms, these labels, to assess the instructional competencies of ourselves, as well as our colleagues, as well as ELT professionals around us. Oftentimes, we feel the necessity to emphasize nativeness or lack thereof. Sometimes it is these labels are placed on us, whether without even noticing it, and whether we like them or not. And our personal qualities and qualifications that we build over those years, countless hours of professional development, all those resources, financial resources, time, energy, blood, tear, and sweat that you invest into your personal and professional development, none of these matters when you actually use these terms. So what matters is whether you can be presented, identified, and in some cases marketed as a native or non-native speaker of English. So, and unfortunately, this is trivializing and deprofessionalizing the English language teaching profession as well as professionals. So by using these terms, we actually create a mutually exclusive us versus them kind of dichotomy. A binary, right? So, and moreover, we're actually creating a sense of professional legitimacy and confining individuals' professional skills and qualities into the non-prefix and defining in terms of their other by using as our benchmark. For many language teaching professionals, this creates a set of damaging impacts on their persona, on their professional self-esteem, as well as their in-class performance. So we see researchers talking about teachers being schizophrenic about themselves, having inferiority complex, or often adopting, sadly, pathological discourses to call "I'm not a native speaker" syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, or imposter syndrome. So we see the traces of this kind of mentality in SLA theory, in instructional materials, in professional development, job advertisement, and most importantly, in our psyche. So collectively, what I argue that each of these actually serve as a building blocks towards what I call compulsory native speakerism, which is similar to compulsory heterosexuality, right? So this term actually serves as a pervasive professional ideology that actually hangs over the ELT, hangs as the Damocles' sword hanging over the ELT profession and professionals. So let's go ahead and try to unpack and problematize some of the inherent and prevalent discourses in the field of English language teaching. So first of all, nests are from Venus and nests are from Mars, or what I call were two different species. Historically speaking, nests and nests were categorized differently, and they were regarded as two different species, which actually results, if you look at English language teaching profession, which results in the typical division of labor that we see in institutions of education around the world. So where nests were regarded or reserved for teaching productive skills, on the other hand, and nests are reserved for receptive skills. And also, as a result, nests are always regarded as foreigners, outsiders, and they will remain so for the rest of their professional lives, right? And nests, on the other hand, are always insiders with an absolute authority on the local. Here's a scenario for us to better understand this. Imagine that you're a native English speaking teacher and you've been living in Turkey for about 12 years and you feel yourself part of the local, both culturally and linguistically. Now, is it really fair to call you an outsider? And I have a huge question mark about that. Another one is, as an N-nest, you have professional experience and expertise in teaching all kinds of language skills. So in that case, is it really fair to ask you to teach only certain language skills? Again, not a good idea. So the problem here is when we use these terms, we actually subscribe to being fixed, rigid, oversimplified, essentialized, and unfortunately mutually exclusive categories of identity, which actually leave no room for contextualized negotiations of borders of linguistic, professional, cultural identity. So the problem is, as soon as we use these terms, we actually connect the dots. And because these labels as categories of identity, they come with a set of assumptions about individuals, a teacher, who, what a teacher is or isn't, what a teacher can or cannot, should or should not do. The second idea, the second discourse that I'd like to share with you today is that nests are better teachers than N-nests, or vice versa. Well, when you take a quick look at the literature explicated on these labels, one of the earliest pieces that you'll probably encounter is the 1992 ELTJ piece by Peter Medgesh on, which is titled "Native or Non-Native, Who's Worth More?" Who raised the question of who's worth more. Well, fast forward to these days. Here is another article. This one comes from 2018, which appeared in another scholarly journal, but then which actually raises the very same question. All the way from 1992 to 2020s or 2018, the questions seem to be similar. And you're probably wondering that there is nothing new under the sun, but believe me, there is. So for a long time, researchers, once they create this chasm between native English speaking teachers and non-native English speaking teachers, they try to come up with the relative advantages of these quote unquote populations. So, however, these constructs, as you know, these are very messy, complex, and they're socially situated. So therefore, these advantages or disadvantages should be treated only for summary purposes and nothing else, because oftentimes they lead to stereotypes. So if people do not become qualified to teach English merely because it's their mother tongue, I argue that people do not become qualified to teach just because it is their second, third, or whatever language. So if the former is native speaker fallacy, as Philipson argues, I argue that the latter should be regarded as non-native speaker fallacy. So none of these words or labels actually help us. But then you may be wondering why on earth we're still talking about these terms, these labels, or their implications in 2020. So, well, it's because it's alive and kicking. So it's alive and kicking in job advertisements and hiring practices and workplace relations, for example. To understand this better, you can take a quick look at one of the stereotypical job advertisements that you see here. And if you take a look closer, take a closer look, you'll see that those expressions like no teaching or TEFL experience, or teachers have to be native speakers of English, and blah, blah, or non-native speakers need not apply. These are some common and bitter realities of our profession today. However, the situation doesn't leave there, and it's far more complicated than it seems. Again, I would like to share a set of case scenarios, all of which are based on real experiences and real individuals. Here is another one. You are an NNEST, but you're not even considered for a teaching position because you are neither local or a citizen nor NEST. So how would this make you feel? Or you're a NEST with experience and expertise, but another NEST with no such background and credential was given the exact same job. So again, how would this make you feel as a professional? Your NEST colleague is neither considered for a position nor for promotion because she or he is not a local, not a citizen. So can we really say that native English speaking teachers are always and universally privileged? Not right, right? So here is another one. As a NEST, you are considered for a teaching position because the job description specifically requires candidates to have passports from the US or the UK, which you don't have. So once again, can we really argue that the NESTs are universally privileged? And the last one, you're an NNEST, but you're not considered for a teaching position, but neither did your NEST colleague because none of you looks European. So how would this make you feel? So ultimate point is that I'm trying to get here is that when we dig deeper, we realize that the sources of discrimination at workplace and hiring settings actually come at the intersection of several different perspectives ranging, and of course nativeness is only one, perhaps the most dominant one, but the discrimination also manifests itself in the form of accent, race, gender, religion, passport, origin, appearance, ethnicity, and even sexual orientation. So from this point of view, I argue that the privilege and marginalization in ELT is context dependent, depending on your individual case and individual context, depending on how you position yourself and how you're positioned, you may experience privilege and marginalization in different ways. For example, just because you are privileged as a native English speaking teacher in one context does not necessarily mean that you will not be marginalized or discriminated against in another one. Or privilege and marginalization is also fluidly experienced in and across categories of identity. For example, you may be privileged in one context, but then, for example, as a native English speaking teacher, but always positioned as an outsider. So this is rather fluid. And finally, these ideas, privilege and marginalization, they're not uniform within the categories of identity. So it's rather simplistic to argue that universal equations that all nests are privileged or all nests are marginalized is not the case. The third point that I would like to share with you today is, yes, you're right, but our learners prefer nests over NNEST, which is what I call supply and demand debate. Well, this perspective is often used as a justification for discrimination in the field of English language teaching. But is this really the case? So if you look at the literature on these issues, my suggestion for you to take these with some grain of salt. Research to this date actually shows us that it's rather inconclusive. So we definitely see it's possible to find those studies that shows students' preferences towards native English speaking teachers or no preference. But it was also documented that as students tend to stay longer at an institution, or as they advance higher in their language proficiency, they tend to have no preference. So it could be argued that students generally value professional qualities and qualifications over nativeness. So the problem here is actually the utilization of existing stereotypes about these labels as a market strategy and converting them into the financial benefits, into the US dollars, British pounds, Bitcoin, whatever. So on a related note, we also need to remind ourselves that it's not always possible to expect that students or parents who support their education always make informed decisions about their educational future. So, and of course, a corollary here is that what can we do to better inform them? And this is something that we need to remind ourselves. The next discourse that I'd like to share with you is that NS movement, or the equity movement towards greater participation in the field of ELT, is only for NSTs. So oftentimes in my interactions with ELT professionals within professional teaching associations or in professional conferences, I hear such questions like, such questions like, I'm a native speaker, so can I join? Or sometimes they give positive comments, but then they always end with a hedging comment, then say, but this comes from a native speaker. Or sometimes we hear such hesitant comments like, or negative attitudes like, I'm a native speaker, and I don't belong here, or I'm a non-native speaker and I don't want to be associated with this. So of course, one of the overarching aims of the NS movement is actually to spearhead a change or a move away from the either or discourse, the mutually exclusive either or discourse, to a more encompassing both and end discourse. But this is not always happening. And of course, why? Which actually brings us to our next point. The last point that I like to share is, as long as NSTs call themselves NSTs, they will perpetuate their self-marginalization, or something that I call the nomenclature debate. Of course, some people take a more critical and more meta perspective and raise some plausible questions about these terms and share those with us. For example, if the term NST is deficit-oriented, confining individuals' professional qualities, competencies, and personas into the non-prefix and define them in relation to their quote-unquote their other, and if we're seeking for greater participation, collaboration, and involvement and inclusivity for all, and if we're aiming to move beyond problematic and mutually exclusive constructs, why on earth we're insisting on using these terms, right? So, well, this is the part that it gets messier and messier, because this is actually, from my own perspective, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, we've got the NS label, which enabled us to put our finger on the problem, especially when you think about its advocacy roots. So by using this term or these terms, we can explore our own biases, misconceptions about these terms, and we can deconstruct them, and we can call or argue for or moving beyond this and argue for a more professional stature for the ELT profession. On the other hand, when you think about the ongoing efforts in terms of teaching, research, as well as advocacy efforts, perhaps it is time to think about, it's time to rethink about or reconsider our own ideas and ideals and goals, as well as our language. So we language teachers, or teachers in general, like to have solid conclusions. So this is my question for everybody. So what is one big idea that I'd like you to take away from this talk? So first and foremost, these labels that I shared with you are ideologically constructed categories of being and becoming. So they're loaded with values, they're loaded with ideologies shaping teachers' professional being and becoming. So please, next time when you choose to use those words, think about its consequences, both positive and negative. Next, these labels have decisive and destructive influences on the various aspects of the ELT enterprise. So anything from the SLA theory to materials to assessment, instruction, as well as hiring and workplace practices, you will see the traces of these ideologies, manifestation of these ideologies. And finally, these labels exist, but they need to be deconstructed, problematized, and reconceptualized. So, well, these labels existed for a long time, They still exist, and they will probably continue to exist at least for some foreseeable future. And I've got here some bad news and good news for you. So let's start with some bad news so that we can end on a positive note. So bad news is that they're not going to disappear just because we say so. However, the good news is that we can still learn about them, right? We can still learn about them, so informed about their consequences, and ultimately find ways to overcome them. So I believe a more egalitarian future for ELT is possible, and each and every one of us here in this virtual room has a chance to be a part of it. So the next time when you hear the question, native or non-native, I hope your Shakespearean answer will not be, that is the question, but more like, is that the question? Still in 2020, because labels are for jars and not people. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move one more time into breakout rooms. I'll just really quickly sum up how to do this, just in case people have just joined. So we are, so we're going to give you some, I'll put the link now. In the group chat, you can see we have 2 Google documents. So one of them is going to be for groups 1 to 5. One of them is going to be for groups 6 to 10. I've mixed the groups up so you can talk to different people. So I'll move you into breakout rooms in 1 second. And yes, and then you can discuss these questions for about 15 to 20 minutes in those groups. So yes, and thank you for another great presentation. Like I was saying yesterday, I think I know we're a bit mean to you. We don't give people lots of time for these presentations, but everyone's managed to really squeeze a lot into their presentations today. So it's been great. Okay, so I will move everyone to their breakout rooms now. Oh. You okay, Matthew? I don't know if that's working or not. Maybe he's away from keyboard. Okay.